What's up, guys, and welcome to my review of the latest Disney live action movie, Snow White. For many people, this is one of their most anticipated movie releases of this year. For many others, it's one of the most dreaded. And for me personally, I think I am in the latter group. It's no question that this movie has been a PR nightmare for Disney. And so, mixing that with just the track record that these Disney live action movies have had, going in, I had really low expectations. But even with all the controversy and negativity and toxicity surrounding this movie, I still felt there was a sliver of a chance that I could actually end up enjoying this film because there are things about it that have the potential to be something that I like. I'm a fan of musicals. I've enjoyed a lot of Rachel Zegler's work in the past. And even though I am a fan of Snow White, it was an important movie to my childhood and to my family. I'm not too protective of it to the point where I am resistant towards any new ideas being introduced into the story. So, did Snow White actually surprise me, or did it just end up being the disaster of a movie that many thought and for some hoped it would be? Well, before I answer that question, I'd like to ask that while you're here, give the video a like and subscribe to the channel as well. Also, get down in the comments and tell me all your thoughts and opinions on Snow White. If you've seen it, did you love it? Did you hate it? What are your thoughts on all the mess surrounding it? I'd love to read all your guys' thoughts on opinions. Now let's get into the review. So starting with the positives, and yes, I actually did end up enjoying this movie much more than I thought I would, and a lot of it is for reasons that I just mentioned. I think Rachel Zegler did really well as Snow White. That's going to be divisive because, given the comments that she made about the original Snow White, a lot of people just aren't going to forgive her for that. They're not going to let it go, and so I don't think she's going to get a fair shake from a lot of people. But in my opinion, she did really well in this role. I think she performed the songs great. She's got a wonderful voice. I think on the acting side of things, I really bought her as the character. She was really sweet and innocent, but I also believed the heroic side that she brought to the character. And so, yes, though I agree the comments that she made were disrespectful and she threw a lot of dirt on the original classic Snow White, I have to give credit where credit is due, and I think she did really well, and I enjoyed her rendition of the Snow White character. This movie does make some notable changes in comparison to the original, which I think any remake should. You don't want to just be a carbon copy of the original, because in that case, what's the point of your existence? Some of these changes I liked, some I disliked. What I did like, though, was the changes they made to the character of the prince. And what's different about this character in this version of the film is that he's not a prince at all. He's more of this Robin Hood thief type of character named Jack. And I actually prefer this version of the character over the prince of the original Snow White, because in the original Snow White, he's pretty bland and generic. I mean, his name is just Prince. He doesn't even have a name. And so he doesn't offer a whole lot to the story, and he's not very interesting. He kind of serves one role in that movie. And that's not really the case with the character in this version. He's much more integral to the entirety of the story. He's not just the true love's kiss at the end. And that just made him far more interesting and a better character to get invested in. And so that's actually something I feel that the remake really did better than the original Snow White did. And sticking with that character, I once again have to bring up the comments made by Rachel Zegler, because one of the things that she was criticized about was that she had made it seem like they were going to completely eradicate the love story aspect of Snow White. And obviously that upset a lot of people. And I don't know why she felt the need to be so adamant that this wasn't a love story, because in my opinion, watching this movie, the love story was still a very prominent and integral part to the movie.
Weird.
And I actually enjoyed the romance between these two characters of Jack and Snow White. And so again, it's just another example of someone involved in this movie creating an uproar amongst fans that just did not need to exist. Going into this movie, one of the things that I was kind of afraid of is that it was going to be very heavy-handed with the messaging. Because again, this is all due to comments made by Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler in that infamous red carpet interview that they gave a couple years ago.
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that
She's
is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
They made it seem like this was going to be a very heavy-handed, in-your-face movie with the messaging, and that actually ended up not being the case. I think any message they were trying to get across, I think they did so successfully, and they also did so very subtly. I don't think it was as heavy-handed as many, I think, are anticipating it to be. And so now that I've seen the movie, I can safely say that that fear that I had going in was squashed. Obviously, this is a musical, and so there are several musical numbers throughout this movie. And if you're not into musicals, you're probably not seeing this movie anyways. But for me personally, I am a fan of them, and I would say I enjoyed almost all of the musical moments in this movie. I'll get into some that I didn't enjoy a little bit later, but I think they're all shot really well. They're very colorful and beautiful. I enjoyed the settings of them. On the choreography side of things, I think they were performed really well. The singing from almost everybody is really solid. Rachel Zegler has shown before in movies like West Side Story that she is a very capable singer, and this is just another movie for for her to be able to showcase that dual talent of hers, and another reason why she's definitely the standout and the star that shines the brightest in this movie. The CGI and special effects look really good here. I don't want to commend them too much for it because a movie with this kind of budget, I expect those things to look good, but unfortunately I know in today's movies a high budget does not guarantee that anymore, so I will give some credit where credit is due. I think it was most impressive dealing with the characters of the Seven Dwarves. The Seven Dwarves had a lot of controversy surrounding them. It was really one of the things that kicked off all the controversies surrounding this film, and it all stemmed from comments made by Peter Dinklage about feeling that these characters were a bit regressionist toward the dwarf community, but a lot of people got upset because what it ended up doing was taking opportunities away from dwarf actors to play what many consider the most famous dwarf characters of all time. But I will say that the version that we do get in this movie, unfortunately, they are CGI and not real actors, but I still did enjoy them. They offered a lot of comedic relief to this movie. They're what to me is the best part of the original movie, and they are still really solid here. I just love these characters. They're some of the best Disney characters in my opinion, and I think they did a really good job with them in this remake. However, I still do wish we could have got real actors in these roles. I still think that was a big mistake on the part of Disney. Getting into the negatives now, and there's really only one place I can start here, and I really did not want to do this, but I have to. Gal Gadot, honey, what the fuck was that? So for complete transparency, I am not a fan of Gal Gadot. I don't think she's a very capable actress, and I don't know how she continues to get these major roles in these big blockbuster movies, and she was my biggest fear going into this movie, and unfortunately, that fear came to fruition, and this is just another performance that she gave that did absolutely nothing for me and really dragged down the movie. I really didn't want to have to rip into her, but her acting is just so dry, with line delivery that is just downright laughable at times. She is capable when she has to just stay like this with normal dialogue and just talking, which I would think that any actress or actor is capable of, but anytime a scene requires her to go up or down emotionally, she just has no range, and like I said, it's laughably bad at times, and the internet's favorite word, cringe in some moments, and I was laughing at times I shouldn't be laughing. I said earlier that I enjoyed almost all the musical numbers. The two that I didn't enjoy were both from her. She can't really dance, she couldn't sing, it's just all around bad, and she is by far the worst part of this movie. You know it's bad when you can go onto YouTube and find full compilations of bad Gal Gadot line deliveries. This has to be the final nail in the coffin and the wake-up call for these studios to realize that she just doesn't have a lot of talent in her. She cannot continue to get put in these prominent roles where she just ends up getting exposed and dragging down these movies. I'm not saying she should never work again. Put her in some more mid-tier, lower budget films and maybe she can work out there. But studios have to stop putting her in these positions because she has proven time and time again that she just doesn't have it. Switching gears to another character, and they do this little subplot with the character of Dopey that I wasn't a really big fan of. It felt very unnecessary and unneeded, and they reframed the dynamic between him and the other six dwarves where instead of them just laughing at some of the silly things he does, they really bully him for it, and I just didn't like to see that. I found it actually kind of unsettling, and it just made me sad. It felt like there was just more hopeful and uplifting filler, that this movie already had a lot of that vibe going on. It didn't really need it. I don't also need one of the dwarves to have a feel-good story. I know their role in this movie, and I wish they had just kept it more simple and traditional. I think that would have been a much better route to take with these characters. Earlier, I had mentioned that this movie gets its message across successfully without being too heavy-handed, and though that is the case, and I was happy to see that, the message itself is pretty unoriginal and not unique. Given the big game that Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot talked about how this wasn't going to be your typical Disney princess movie, in the end, it kind of ended up being your typical Disney princess movie. I'm sure that before all the reshoots, when they made those statements, this movie was what they felt more interesting and different from princess movies of the past, but for what we ended up getting, it just created another kind of egg on their face moment, and it's clear that those reshoots were done to get this movie back in a familiar place and fix it in order to appease an enraged fan base, which again is an issue that they created entirely on their own. The last thing I want to say here in the negatives is that I actually feel like this movie could have been a little longer. It felt like in the last 25 minutes, they were rushing through a lot of key moments in the Snow White story, and I would have much rather seen them take their time, stretch out that runtime a little bit, and develop these moments a little better. It just felt like we were going boom, 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 kind of zooming all over the place, and it really affected the pacing for me, and I think it made the moments less impactful than if they had taken more time with it. So if they could have slowed it down, stretched the movie out, maybe maybe 10 to 15 minutes more, I think it would have done a lot for it and made these moments a little more effective. So there you guys have it. Those are my thoughts on Snow White. I feel like a lot of people aren't going to give this movie a chance, and I totally get it. It did itself no favors. It seems like it managed to step in every pile of dog shit that it possibly could, and it burned a lot of bridges with the core fan base. For the score here, I'm giving Snow White a 6 out of 10. It's a real shame that Gal Gadot is such a stale piece of bread in this movie because it really bogs it down and makes it one that I don't ever see myself rewatching, mainly because I don't want to ever have to sit through that performance again. It also fails to break the mold of the typical Disney princess movie, and we were led to believe that they would do something different, and I just don't think it ended up doing so. However, Rachel Zegler does give a really good performance as Snow White, and they did enough in this movie that I would recommend at least streaming it once it's available on Disney Plus. But let me know what you guys think of Snow White down in the comments below. If you've seen it, did you love it? Did you hate it? What are your thoughts on all the controversy surrounding this film? Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel as well while you're here, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.